There is a particular hour that decides more about a man's life than any interview, any promotion, any lucky break ever could. And most people sleep straight through it without knowing what it cost them. You already know the hour I mean. It arrives quietly, before the phone starts buzzing, before the world asks anything of you. And what you do in that hour, or what you don't do, has a way of writing itself into every other hour that follows. Picture two farmers, same soil, same weather, same seed. One rises before the sun and walks his field while the ground is still cool, checking the fence line, clearing what the wind knocked loose in the night. The other rises when the sun is already high, when the work has grown hot and stubborn. Both men will call themselves farmers. Both will tell you they worked hard, but only one of them was shaping the day. The other was simply reacting to it. This is not a speech about waking up early for the sake of waking up early. Plenty of tired, uninspired people set an alarm for 5 and accomplish nothing but exhaustion. That's not the lesson. The lesson is this: what you do in the first quiet hour of your day reveals what you actually believe about your future. Not what you say you believe, not what you post or promise. What you believe, underneath all the noise, when nobody is watching and no one would know the difference either way. Because here is a truth that stings a little the first time you hear it. Your career didn't stall in some dramatic collapse. It didn't fall apart in a single bad quarter or one missed opportunity. It slipped, one snoozed alarm at a time, one skipped hour at a time, until years had passed and you were standing in the exact same place, wondering why the people who started beside you were no longer beside you at all. You felt that plateau before you could name it. That quiet comparison when someone your age, no smarter than you, no more talented than you, somehow pulled ahead. You told yourself it was luck or timing or connections. Sometimes it was, but more often it was simply this: they had an hour you didn't have, not more time in the day, the same 24. But they spent theirs building, while you spent yours recovering from the day before. 6 in the morning does not care about your excuses, and it does not care about your potential either. It only responds to what you actually do with it. And that raises an uncomfortable question worth sitting with for a moment. If your future is truly being decided in that hour, what exactly has it been deciding about you lately? Most people don't fail because they lack ambition. They fail because they've quietly convinced themselves that discipline is something you feel first and do second. So they wait. They wait for motivation to knock, for energy to arrive on its own, for some future version of themselves to show up more rested, more inspired, more ready. That version never comes. It was never going to come, because discipline was never meant to follow feeling. It was meant to replace it. Think about a man learning to swim who refuses to get in the water until he no longer fears it. He can study the strokes, read about breathing technique, watch 100 videos of other men swimming with ease. But the fear doesn't leave from the shore. It leaves in the water, and only after he's been in it enough times that his body stops treating it as a threat. Waiting to feel ready is how a strong swimmer drowns on dry land, still standing on the sand, still convinced he's preparing. This is where most people get stuck, quietly, for years. Not in some dramatic failure, but in a slow, comfortable stall. A stall dressed up to look like patience. They call it waiting for the right time. They call it not being in the right season. Comfortable words for an uncomfortable truth. The pain of getting up early felt heavier in that moment than the pain of staying exactly where they were. And so they chose the smaller pain over and over, without noticing that small pains compound just as surely as small gains do. Nobody plans to waste 10 years. Nobody sets out at 25 to still be circling the same goals at 35. Still telling the same story about the year things are finally going to change. It happens by accident, the way a boat drifts from shore. Not from one wave, but from the current, working on it minute by minute while the boat sits still, believing itself anchored. And here is what makes this particular trap so dangerous. It doesn't feel like failing. It feels like surviving. It feels responsible, even. You told yourself you were tired, and you were. You told yourself you'd earned the rest, and maybe you had. But rest and retreat are not the same thing. And somewhere along the way, most people stop noticing which one they've settled into. The financial pressure you feel despite working hard, the sense of being behind some invisible schedule everyone else seems to be following. None of that arrived overnight either. It built the same way the stall built. Quietly. Reasonably. One skipped hour at a time. So if waiting for readiness is the trap, and comfort is the current pulling you backward without your permission, what actually breaks the pattern? Not more effort in the moments you already show up for. Something else. Something most people walk right past because it doesn't look like hard work at all. Here is the principle, and it's simpler than most people want it to be. The early hour doesn't work because of what it produces. It works because of what it proves. When you rise before the day demands it, before anyone is checking on you, before there's an audience or a deadline or a boss standing over your shoulder, you are casting a vote, not for a habit, for an identity. You are telling yourself, in the only language your mind actually believes, action, not intention, that you are the kind of person who does the hard thing before the easy thing asks permission. And once you've told yourself that enough mornings in a row, you stop needing to argue about it. It simply becomes what's true. This is the difference between motivation and mastery that so few people ever sit with long enough to understand. Motivation is a match. Bright, sudden, gone in a minute. It gets you up once, twice, maybe a whole excited week. But a match was never built to heat a house through the winter. What heats the house is the pilot light, small and constant, unglamorous, burning steadily whether anyone's watching or not. The 6 o'clock hour is not your match. It's your pilot light. It doesn't need to be impressive. It needs to stay lit. And this is where the two pains finally show themselves plainly. There is the pain of discipline. Waking up when the bed is warm and the room is dark and nothing outside of you is forcing the choice. And there is the pain of regret. Standing at 40 or 50, looking back at a decade of mornings you gave away to comfort, wondering what might have been built with them. Both pains are real. Both will be paid. The only decision left to you is which one you pay now, and which one compounds with interest and comes due later, when you have far less time left to correct it. Here's what nobody tells you about that early hour. It's not really about productivity. You could spend it reading, training, planning, praying, thinking clearly for the first time all week. The content matters less than the commitment, because what you're actually building, hour by hour, is trust in yourself, not confidence. Confidence is cheap, it talks. Trust is expensive. Trust is earned only by keeping the small promises nobody else even knew you made. And that trust becomes the foundation for everything else you'll ever attempt. You cannot build a business, a marriage, a body, or a legacy on a foundation of broken promises to yourself, no matter how talented you are. Talent builds the walls. Self-trust pours the concrete. Skip that step, and it doesn't matter how impressive the walls look. Eventually, something gives. So the principle stands plainly in front of you now. The hour proves the identity, and the identity produces the results in that order, never the reverse. Which leaves one honest question. Does this actually hold up outside of theory, out in the real, complicated lives people actually live? It holds up, and it holds up in places far removed from grand ambition, in ordinary lives that never ask to be examples of anything. Consider a woman running a small bakery, up before 4 while the rest of the block is still dark. Nobody photographs that hour. No customer ever sees the dough proofing at 4:15 or the ovens being checked at 4:30. By the time the doors open at 7, the work looks effortless. Bread simply appears, warm and ready, as if it had always been there. But effortless is the wrong word entirely. What the customer tastes at 7 is only the visible tenth of a process that started 3 hours earlier, unseen, unapplauded, repeated so many mornings in a row that it stopped feeling like sacrifice and started feeling like identity. She doesn't rise early because she loves mornings. She rises early because she decided, a long time ago, what kind of baker she was going to be, and the dough simply holds her to it now. Or think of an old stone bridge, the kind built centuries ago without steel, without modern machinery, standing today while buildings from 20 years back have already been torn down and replaced. What makes that bridge outlast structures built with far greater technology? Not the visible stones on top, the ones travelers walk across without a second thought. It's the foundation buried below the waterline, laid stone by stone, slowly, with a patience that had no interest in shortcuts, because the builders knew exactly what they were constructing something to survive. Nobody admires a foundation. Everybody eventually depends on one. This is precisely what separates the entrepreneur who's still standing after the fifth hard year from the one who quietly folded after the second. Both faced setbacks. Both had mornings where quitting felt reasonable, even wise. But one of them had already spent years proving to himself, hour by unglamorous hour, that he does the work regardless of how he feels about it that day. When the crisis came, he didn't need to summon new strength from nowhere. He simply did what he'd already been doing for years, under slightly heavier weather. And consider the runner who trains at dawn for a race still months away. There is no crowd cheering him down an empty road at 6 in the morning. No finish line tape, no medal, no applause. Just his own breath and the sound of his shoes against the pavement. But that man is not really training his legs. He is training the part of himself that keeps a promise when there's absolutely no external reason to. Race day doesn't create his composure. It only reveals what was quietly built on 100 mornings nobody else witnessed. None of these people were extraordinary before they started. The bridge wasn't destined to outlast the towers around it. The baker wasn't born disciplined. What they had in common was simpler and far more available to you than talent ever was. They simply decided, in the dark, before anyone required it of them, who they were going to be that day. Which leads to the only question that actually matters now. How does an ordinary person with a full schedule and a tired body actually start doing this tomorrow? Start smaller than your pride wants to allow. This is where most people sabotage themselves before they've even begun. They hear a principle like this and immediately imagine the finished version of it. 2 hours of reading, a 5-mile run, a perfectly ordered morning routine copied from someone whose life looks nothing like theirs. And when that version collapses by Thursday, they conclude the whole idea was flawed, when really, they just built the mansion before they poured the foundation. Set the alarm 15 minutes earlier, not 2 hours, 15 minutes. Small enough that your excuses run out of material. You cannot reasonably tell yourself you're too exhausted for 15 minutes, too busy for 15 minutes, too overwhelmed for 15 minutes. The size is the strategy. You are not trying to transform your life in a single morning. You are trying to prove, in the smallest possible unit, that your word to yourself still means something. Decide the night before what those 15 minutes will hold, because a tired mind at dawn will not make good decisions on the spot. Lay out the notebook, the running shoes, the book. Whatever the task is, remove every ounce of friction between your eyes opening and your body moving. Willpower is a limited resource, strongest right when you wake and weakest by the time you've had to negotiate with yourself for 10 minutes in a dark room. Don't waste that early willpower on decisions. Spend all of it on action. Protect this hour the way you'd protect something that costs you money, because in every real sense, it does. If a meeting were scheduled for 6 a.m., you wouldn't casually skip it because the bed felt comfortable. Yet people abandon this appointment with themselves constantly, without a second thought, because there's no one else on the calendar invite to disappoint. Change that. You are on that invite. Start treating the meeting with yourself as the one you're least willing to cancel. And expect resistance, because resistance is not a sign you're doing it wrong. It's a sign you're doing something that matters. The version of you still comfortable in old patterns will argue convincingly at 5:45 in the morning. That voice will sound reasonable. It will remind you of how tired you are, how it's just one day, how tomorrow would really be a better start. Every person who has ever built anything worth having has heard that exact voice at that exact hour and simply moved anyway. Track nothing but the streak of showing up. Not the results yet, just the appointment kept. Results are slow and often invisible in the early weeks. And if you're watching for outcomes too soon, you'll quit before the compounding even begins. But a kept promise, you can measure daily. And a month of kept promises does something no single dramatic effort ever could. It quietly rebuilds the trust you have in your own word. Because here's what waits on the other side of that rebuilt trust. Once the 15 minutes have become an hour, and the hour has become simply who you are. So let's return to where we started. To that quiet hour most people sleep straight through, never knowing exactly what it was costing them. You know, now it was never really about the clock. It was about the vote. Every morning you gave away to comfort was a vote for staying exactly where you are. Every morning you reclaim is a vote for who you're actually capable of becoming. Nobody is coming to wake you up for this. There's no manager checking if you kept the promise. No mentor standing over your bed at 5:45. That's precisely why it matters so much. Anyone can show discipline when someone's watching. The rare ones. The ones who actually change the direction of their lives are the ones who show it when nobody would ever know the difference either way. You are not behind schedule. There is no schedule. There's only the version of you still waiting for permission and the version of you willing to get up in the dark and start proving something to yourself before the world even opens its eyes. The gap between those two people was never talent, and it was never luck. It was 1 hour, chosen or wasted, repeated until it became a life. The pain is coming either way. Rohn was right about that, and time hasn't made him wrong. The pain of rising early when everything in you wants to stay still, or the pain of looking back one day at everything that early hour could have built, had you simply been willing to meet it. One of those pains lasts an hour. The other one lasts a lot longer than that, and it doesn't stop compounding just because you'd rather not think about it. So here's the only real question worth carrying out of this room, out of this video, back into your actual life tomorrow morning. What will your 6 a.m. prove about you? Not someday, not when things settle down, not when the season's easier, not when you feel ready. Tomorrow. The alarm is already set, whether you've admitted that to yourself yet or not. If this reached you, don't just let it pass through and disappear the way most things do. Stay close to whoever's saying things like this to you. The people committed to your growth, not your comfort. Come back tomorrow. Bring someone with you who's been sleeping through their own 6 a.m., not because I need the company, but because the road gets easier when you're not walking it in silence, and because a man rarely rises alone for long before he starts looking for others rising with him. Your future isn't being decided in some distant, dramatic moment you're still waiting for. It's being decided at 6 a.m. tomorrow, in the quiet, before anyone's watching, in the choice only you will ever know you made.